A perfect marriage in the eyes of the world, but the reality is different. A rising political career and an apparently bright future. But everything changes with a simple phone call, which will bring many mysteries. Let's get started. Baek Sa-eon, the presidential spokesperson, arrives at the party and becomes the center of attention. Soon after, his wife, Hong Hee-ju, joins him, awakening admiration among the attendees. Even though she seems nervous, Se-eon tells her to stay calm and avoid making mistakes. Together, they climb some stairs while the gazes and cameras of the guests follow them. At another moment, Hae-ju works as a sign language interpreter at a news station. A technical failure compromises the broadcast, although she continues interpreting without realizing the problem. Suddenly, an urgent broadcast interrupts the program. The president makes a statement about a kidnapping carried out by a terrorist group. The captors demand the withdrawal of South Korean troops and the payment of a ransom, threatening to execute hostages if their demands are not met. Se-eon informs that the government will not give in to the terrorists and that all resources will be mobilized to rescue the hostages without negotiating. Hae-ju, who is watching the broadcast before leaving the station, looks upset with her husband's statements and has a defiant expression. She throws an insult at him before leaving. At the end of his speech, Se-eon declares a temporary media embargo. Later, Hee-ju meets with her mother and her mother-in-law. Se-eon's mother insists that she should quit her job to focus on supporting her husband's presidential campaign. She also mentions her selective mutism and asks if she thinks she will overcome it, but concludes that it's better for her to remain silent. When her mother-in-law leaves, her mother scolds her for not trying hard enough to keep the man who was taken from another woman. After the meeting, Hae-ju stays in her car under the rain and listens to an analysis about the government's stance on the kidnapping. Suddenly, her radio starts to malfunction and shortly after, she loses control of the car. Desperate, she tries to maneuver until the vehicle comes to a sudden stop at an intersection. When she tries to get out, she discovers that the doors are locked. She remembers a report about how hackers can take control of a car using malware and realizes what's happening. In Se-eon's office, his subordinate, John Woo, informs him that the media has investigated his past and discovered his training with the FBI and his experience in negotiations with the New York police. Now, public opinion demands that he be the one to lead the negotiations. Meanwhile, Hee-ju is still trapped in her car. A truck passes dangerously close to her vehicle, and in the rain, a man dressed in black with his face covered. It's coming closer. Without saying a word, he unlocks the doors. Se-eon receives a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end of the phone threatens to kill Hee-ju, but the call cuts off when his phone runs out of battery. When he recharges it, he tries to contact his mother, who assures him that Hee-ju is with her mother-in-law. When he calls his mother-in-law, she also lies, claiming that his wife is with her and that she will send her home after dinner. Convinced that the call was a prank, Se-eon ignores it. However, when the stranger calls back to demand a ransom, Se-eon hangs up immediately, declaring that he won't pay. The kidnapper reacts violently and starts to strangle Hee-ju. Shortly after, he stops and tells her that her fate depends on how much her husband values her. When he tries to call again, Jung-woo accidentally answers. Se-eon, not knowing that his wife is listening, responds coldly. Call back when there's a body. Desperate, Hee-ju tries to crash the car to escape. Suddenly, the radio starts working again and broadcasts a breaking news bulletin. The negotiations with the kidnappers have been successful and the hostages have been released. Meanwhile, Se-eon wraps up his day with a speech before leaving the office. As he exits, reporter Hyuk-jin intercepts him to ask for an exclusive, but Se-eon turns him down. However, just before leaving, he asks for help to trace the unknown number. Even though he's still convinced it's a scam, he has a bad feeling. S.A. Eon drives at full speed with Hyuk-jin in the passenger seat. He dodges vehicles with precision while the journalist is terrified. He explains that someone went through the trouble of using a foreign line and a voice modulator, which makes him suspicious. When he gets home, he calms down upon seeing Hee-ju in the kitchen. He casually mentions the strange call, but his assistant Do-ja-hee contacts him with new information about the tracking. After dinner, Hee-ju receives a call from her mother, who insists on talking about her marriage and the possibility of having children. At that moment, she remembers her wedding day. The ceremony wasn't for her, but for her sister, Hong In-ah, who ran away before the wedding. To preserve the alliance between both families, Hye-ju took her place as Sa-yeon's wife under a contract with 3 conditions. Never ask for a divorce, never reveal the truth about their marriage, and never interfere in his political career. Breaking any of them would cost a fine of 2 billion won. At the party, Hee-ju accompanies Se-eon as an interpreter. The ambassador's wife mistakenly assumes that she is the politician's wife, but Hyaju denies it. Later, upset by a comment where Seon mentions that his wife is his weakness, she leaves the reception, throwing an insult at him. Shortly after, Seon receives another call from the same number. This time, the tone of the voice unsettles him. The stranger is at the party and seems to know intimate details about his life. The threat is clear. He won't go after Hyaju, but after her true love, Hongina. The final twist reveals that the person on the other end of the line is Hyaju. Seon, visibly disturbed, asks about their demands. She demands that he leave his marriage behind and go back to Ina, insisting that Hyaju should have never been in his life. Remembering the call in which her husband ordered her execution, Hyaju clings to her resentment. In a change of attitude, Seon stops begging and adopts a threatening tone. She gives him until the next day to make a decision. However, he responds coldly, warning that if anyone tries to blackmail him, they should have studied him better before messing with him. Hyaju is about to hang up but stops upon hearing that last word. With a biting tone, she reminds him of what has happened in the last few hours. Seon, completely beside himself, vows to find the person responsible, not realizing that the answer has been right in front of him all along. Seon continues the conversation with the kidnapper, threatening to catch him and make him pay once he discovers his identity. In the ladies' room, Hyaju locks herself away, trying to calm her breathing as she analyzes each of his words. She wonders if Seon suspects her, but soon she realizes that he still knows nothing. Seeing his reaction, she understands that his anger doesn't come from love, but from wounded pride for having been challenged. More than worrying about her, Seon is outraged that someone dared to attack her, and in doing so, questioned his authority. After the call, Seon orders his new bodyguards to escort Hyaju home immediately. At the same time, he sends the call recording to his team so they can analyze the voice and remove the modulator, in order to track down the culprit. At home, Hyaju plays the recording several times, trying to interpret her husband's reaction, while also worrying that the real kidnapper is looking for her to get the phone back. Seon reviews the car's dashboard camera, looking for clues that will help him clarify the incident. When Hyaju realizes this, she is filled with panic. Fearing that he will recognize her voice in the recording, she runs after him, and seeing his expression of relief when he tells her that the camera isn't working, she can finally breathe easy. As they talk in the parking lot, a motorcycle speeds toward them. In a quick reflex, Seon pushes her away, preventing her from getting hit. Then he insists that she stay home for her safety. But Hyaju begs him to let her continue with her work, explaining that she has a trial where she needs to interpret. Seon agrees on the condition that she always has bodyguards. After the conversation, he contacts Park, the administrative officer, to review the security footage of the accident. The next day, Seon has lunch with his mother, who notices that her son is distracted due to the constant calls from Choi. Young-jin. With her usual coldness, the woman advises him to study his enemy well before confronting him. Reflecting on it, Seon comes to the conclusion that very few people know the truth about his marriage, which significantly narrows down his list of suspects. Meanwhile, Hyaju runs into an old college friend, Sang-woo, and leaves with him without telling her bodyguards. One of them, alarmed, informs Seon, who immediately interrupts his meeting and orders them to find her as soon as possible. Even though he tries to concentrate, anxiety consumes him. Finally, the bodyguards locate her in a cafe, chatting calmly with Sang-woo. When Seon receives a photo of them both smiling together, he feels a pang of jealousy that he doesn't know how to interpret. Back at home, Hyaju receives a visit from her mother, Jeon-hui, who gives her a set of lingerie and insists that she must seduce Seon to secure their marriage. According to her, the future of the family depends on their relationship thriving, because if she fails, they won't be able to afford her father's treatment. Knowing Hyuju's devotion to her father, Jeon-hui, uses this as a tool for manipulation. Instead of following her mother's advice, Hyaju puts on the lingerie and calls Seon again, pretending to be the kidnapper. This time, Seon asks if the kidnapper is close to him. As he refuses to give in to her demands, Hyaju decides to send him a photo of a birthmark on her thigh. Seon, bewildered, isn't sure if the photo really belongs to his wife. The kidnapper mocks him for not knowing his wife's body. Seon, in an attempt to regain control, calls him a pervert and pressures him with personal questions. Hyaju, frustrated, loses her composure and challenges him to check for himself if the birthmark is real. After the call, Seon checks with his team to see if they manage to trace the origin, but they don't get any results. Additionally, he decides to hide the photo to avoid further questions. Intrigued, he returns home and finds Hee-ju in bed. He tries to check if the mark is there, but she clings to the sheets, refusing to show her leg. In the struggle, he loses his balance and falls on top of her. Uncomfortable with the situation, he changes the subject and mentions an interpreter position at the presidential office. Potential, clarifying that if he wants it, he will have to earn it on his own. A memory from the early days of their marriage floods Seon's mind. Back then, Hye-ju tried to seduce him, but he rejected her, warning her not to fall in love with him. Now, he wonders if it was a mistake. Meanwhile, Sang-woo has an encounter with Yuri, whom he helps when she's about to trip over a group of fans at the television station. Accidentally, she spills hot coffee on his arm. During the conversation, he mentions that he will be joining a new program. Yuri gets offended when Sang-woo implies that fans can be annoying and that their devotion borders on obsession. The conversation shifts to the idea of falling in love, and he mentions that there was someone he liked in the past, hinting that it was Hee-ju. For her part, Hee-ju visits her father at the nursing home and discovers that he gave up his presence so she could pursue her dream. From being a news anchor, moved but frustrated, she breaks down in tears, feeling like she has lost her way. In his office, Se-eon reviews the security footage from the night of the incident again and sees a man getting into Hee-ju's car. Then he talks to reporter Hyuk-jin and indirectly mentions his suspicions. Hyuk-jin suggests that his wife might be having an affair and that her lover is trying to scam him. At 10 p.m. Hee-ju calls Se-eon again as the kidnapper, but he hangs up immediately. Confused, she tries to call him again, but this time he responds that he's not the desperate one and that she should call back in 5 minutes. When the time is up, she calls again. Se-eon confronts her, threatening to turn the situation against her. In the middle of the call, an explosion echoes in the distance, leaving Hye-ju terrified. The next morning, she sees on the news that her call with Se-eon was leaked and is presented as a threat before an attack. Shocked, she realizes that it wasn't her who planted the bomb. Just at that moment, Se-eon arrives home, corners her in the kitchen, and coldly orders her to show him the birthmark on her thigh. In an intimidating tone, he warns her that she can do it herself or he will do it by force. Se-eon is still on the call with the kidnapper, unaware that, at the same time, a bomb has been delivered to his office disguised as a pizza. The explosion happens while he's talking to Hee-ju. He wakes up in the hospital, and Dojae informs him that no one was seriously injured. Frustrated that he can't publicly admit he's being threatened, he leaks part of the conversation to the media. He also checks the reports from Hee-ju's bodyguards to make sure she's okay. When he gets home, he tries to check the birthmark on Hee-ju's thigh, but she stops him. He carries her to the bedroom, and he insists, but her reaction makes him doubt whether she knows what he's looking for. She pretends to be worried about his injury, and he backs off without insisting any further. In his office, he receives a call from Dojae about the possibility that the attack is related to recent arson cases. Se-eon doesn't believe they're connected and orders a separate investigation. She listens in secret and discovers that Se-eon manipulated the recording before it was aired in the media. Later, he checks his phone for hacks, and she, alarmed, deletes the photo from the black phone before he can find it. Meanwhile, Se-eon's and Hee-ju's parents meet. Kyung-jin reacts with concern upon seeing the news of the explosion, even though the media doesn't reveal Se-eon's name. On the other hand, Sang-woo is getting ready for a TV show where he mentions an incident from his childhood, but he leaves the story unfinished and heads out to lunch with Hee-ju. Se-yoon checks her wife's phone and discovers the date. Before leaving, he receives information about the materials used in the bomb and the impossibility of tracing the kidnapper's voice. On the way, he decides to invite Yuri to the same restaurant where Hee-ju and Sang-woo are. Upon arriving, he pretends to be surprised and joins the table, using the opportunity to interrogate Sang-woo with obvious discomfort. When Hee-ju leaves, Se-eon receives a call confirming the capture of the arsonist. After lunch, she confronts him, asking if he suspects she's having an affair. He replies that maybe he doesn't know her as well as he thinks. Later, Hee-ju visits the center and talks to Jin-ji about a possible job as an interpreter at the presidential office. In the office, Se-eon discovers that Sang-woo is a psychiatrist specializing in criminology and a host of true crime shows, which increases her jealousy. The kidnapper strikes again, hacking into Hee-ju's car and playing Call Me Now. Terrified, she goes back home, and before Se-eon arrives, she calls him pretending to be the kidnapper. This time he asks, what does he gain by leaving Hee-ju? She responds that he clearly doesn't love her, so why does he keep her around? Se-eon hangs up, assuring her that he will never leave her, Back, he tells Heeju that divorce is not an option and that she needs to focus on her work. She asks why it matters to him so much, but he avoids answering and gets into bed with her. When she protests, he challenges her to join him if she can really resist. Finally, Hyeju agrees and he promises to protect her. During the night, she dreams of her childhood and the accident where the president's son died. Her mother forced her to pretend to be mute to gain the family's sympathy. The next day, Saeyeon and Hyejung play tennis. During the conversation, Hyejung hints that the husband in the infidelity story might love his wife too much. In order to uncover the truth, the kidnapper changes tactics and briefly kidnaps Heeju's father, using him to send her a warning. He shows her 4 bloodied teeth and demands that she continue the threats against Saeyeon. Desperate, she runs to the shelter and finds the police. Although her father is unharmed, the warning is clear. Seeing her in shock, Saeyeon shows up with his team and in front of the agents surprises her by openly introducing her as his wife. Saeyeon receives a call from the shelter about his father-in-law. The president lends him his car to get there faster. After picking up Heeju, he promises to secure a safer place for her father. Then, instead of taking her home, he takes her to a hotel and assigns her a room to rest before dinner with her parents. Before leaving her, he mentions the kidnapper and asks if she's hiding something. Although she doesn't respond directly, her silence confirms to him that there's more than meets the eye. During dinner, Saeyeon argues with her father, who expects her to quit her job to join his presidential campaign. Saeyeon makes it clear that he has no intention of following in his footsteps. Meanwhile, Hyeju arrives late and her father-in-law criticizes her, implying that she is a useless burden. Saeyeon responds by confronting his family, making it clear that he won't be manipulated. When they try to intimidate him with the press, he reveals that he knows about the paparazzi stationed outside. Hui-hyun throws a glass of wine in his direction, but Saeyeon reacts in time and protects Hyeju. At the restaurant, Yuri meets Sang-woo and they talk about Saeyeon. She mentions her marriage to the daughter of a powerful media group and asks if Heeju is his old love. Sang-woo almost chokes on the question. On the way home, Saeyeon receives information from Dojae about the kidnapper's threat. The bloody teeth were fake and they used animal blood. Meanwhile, Heeju plans to get rid of the black phone, but she stops when Saeyeon offers to take out the trash. During the struggle for the bag, he receives a call from his colleagues wishing him good luck in the interview. S.A. Eon also wishes him success and advises him to stop worrying about what others think. The next day, S.A. Eon arrives late to work for the first time. Dojae informs that they are close to discovering the kidnapper's gender through voice analysis. He also mentions that Sang-woo has a special interest in cases of fires and bombings, which intrigues Saeyeon. When Heeju's interview for the interpreter position begins, he initially watches her from his office, but seeing her in action, he decides to attend in person. During the test, he puts her through several rounds with different videos, impressed by her accuracy. When he asks her how she does it, she reveals that she studied his speeches so much that she can anticipate his words. Seon is surprised, but he doesn't show it. Then, he reads a document about a distant couple who don't express their feelings, questioning whether their story would have been different if they had been honest. Heeju interprets it, and Saeyeon leaves without saying anything more. Elsewhere, Hong Aine returns to the country. Later, Heeju visits her father in his new nursing home and finds out that Saeyeon took care of the move and bought him new socks. Confused by his behavior, she wonders what he is really looking for. In the office, S.A. Eon confesses that he liked Heeju's effort. A flashback reveals that he met her when they were kids. At a family dinner, he saw her being forced by her mother to follow orders, while he rebelled by refusing to eat fish. Noticing that Heeju liked him, he offered her his food. Since then, he has always watched her. That night, Heeju finds out that her sister has returned and remembers the moment when her mother asked her to take her place at the wedding. Saeyeon gave her a ring and asked her to keep it until the real wife returned. He decides to keep the black phone instead of throwing it away. Saeyeon, for his part, contacts Yuri to ask her about Sang-woo and finds out that he grew up in the Nuri Dream Center orphanage. Shortly after, the kidnapper, that is Hyeju, calls him. This time she answers his question about what he would gain if he left Hyeju. She mentions the return of his sister and asks if he is willing to get a divorce to get her back. Saeyeon surprises her with his response. Aina made a deal before the wedding, which means they could never get married. He hangs up before Heeju can ask more questions. When he gets home, he congratulates Hyeju on her interview and informs her that he will attend the anniversary of Chungwoon Daily News. Heeju assumes she will go to see Inha. Before the event, Jung-hwae and Kyung-jin argue in the beauty salon. At the ceremony, Wi-hyung tries to pretend that he is convincing Saeyeon to join his campaign, while Il-kyung fears that without him, the election will fail. Jung-hoi scolds Hyeju for letting Seon find out the truth about his father. In the bathroom, she hears other women praising In-ha and belittling her. Later, seeing Seon talking to them, she takes a glass of wine and steps out onto the balcony. At 10 p.m., she calls Seon as the kidnapper and asks him how he felt when In-ha left him. He replies that there wasn't much difference, which hurts her. She claims that she was always just a replacement and that she let herself be dazzled by the luxurious life. But Seon interrupts her, defending Hyeju and making it clear that he won't allow them to speak badly of her. As she speaks, she heads to the rooftop wearing a coat. Her words are so sincere that Hyeju is moved. Crying, she asks him, "Why did you treat me so badly?" The elevator dings and Seon appears, finding her with the black phone in her hand. In a flashback, it is shown that, upon fulfilling his promise to take a photo with a police officer, after giving his statement, he discovered the truth. Listening to the recording of the patrol, he was shocked to hear Hyeju's voice for the first time, screaming desperately. At first, he was furious, but then he fell silent, rethinking everything he thought he knew about her. Seon arrives at the party, still thinking about Hyeju's secret. She watches as Yeon-hui drags her into the bathroom and listens to their conversation. Later, she confronts her mother-in-law and demands that she treat her daughter better. During the event, he can't help but keep looking at her, while his father-in-law insists that she join her father's campaign. At 10 p.m., she receives a call from 406 and goes up to the rooftop to give her jacket to Hyeju. He finds her talking on the phone, and as she hurriedly hides it, she trips. Seon holds her and fears that she might try to commit suicide. She, nervous, starts to hiccup. When he orders her to make a sound, she refuses. Seon's frustration grows. Then, Dojae calls him and informs him that 406 is in the building. Fearing that Hyeju might be in danger, Seon runs down the stairs. At the party, he finds her safe and asks Dojae to secure the guest list. Back at home, he checks to see if he still has the scar on his knee, remembering a childhood moment when he saved her from a dog and she endured the pain without screaming. That night, both of them stay awake, each lost in their thoughts. Seon thinks about confronting her, but he realizes that he also has secrets. The lack of sleep makes him fall asleep in a work meeting. Jung-woo, worried, asks her if their marriage has any secrets, but she tells him not to worry, unless it's about money. Hyeju celebrates with her colleagues after getting the interpreter position. She accidentally sends a heart emoji to Seon, which confuses him. He sends her a message congratulating her, and she offers to treat him to a meal as a thank you. Then, she asks her colleagues what to give as a gift on this occasion. Dojae suggests a suit, and Seon invites her to a store. At the same time, Ayana appears at the place unnoticed. Seon picks out a suit for Hyeju and a blue dress, but she rejects it. He buys her another one at a different store and tells her to stop underestimating herself. Ina follows him in secret. During their walk, Dojae informs Seon that 406 seems to be a woman. Elsewhere, Yuri and Sang-woo visit an abandoned mansion. Sang-woo remembers a boy who suggested dissecting a cat as a game. After refusing, some children from the orphanage disappeared, and he has worked to build his platform and uncover the truth. Yuri, feeling guilty, confesses that she mentioned her past to Seon. Back in the city, he receives a message about Hyeju's new job and gets excited. Sang-woo invites Hyeju for a drink. Seon sees the message and encourages her to accept. The dinner turns into a gathering of four, with Seon and Yuri joining in. Tension rises between Seon and Sang-woo when he mentions that Hyeju dreamed of being a news presenter. Yuri, without realizing it, asks how she considered that career being mute, which makes everyone uncomfortable. As the conversation heats up, Hyeju intervenes and steps away to get some air. Seon follows her. While watching two sisters walk together, he remembers how Hyeju always helped INA before she got her hearing aids. It frustrated him that she accepted everything without a fight. At that moment, he receives a call from 406. Hyeju mentions that INA has come back and asks if he will change his mind. Seon insists that he won't. When she questions him if he's still with her out of responsibility or compassion, he's about to respond when a truck nearly hits him. Hyeju sees him and runs to save him. At the last second, she pushes him out of the way and calls him by his name. Se-eon, in shock, begs her to say it again, but she denies it. He asks her to speak whenever she wants and warns her to be careful with her hand injuries. Later, she receives a call from the real kidnapper. The next day, the new interpreters arrive to work. Se-eon promises to learn sign language to coordinate better. Later, Hyeju teaches him some phrases, and everyone is surprised when he joins the team scene. They also approve a weekend retreat. In the middle of the meeting, Dojae gets a call and takes Seon outside. He makes her listen to an undistorted version of 406's voice, revealing that it's a woman. Seon starts to suspect Hyeju and sends another recording to compare them. The night before, the kidnapper threatened Hyeju for saving Seon. He said he knew her true nature and wanted her to suffer. She also warned that Seon was suspicious of her. After dinner, Seon gets drunk and they send him home. Hyeju helps him inside, and as he stumbles, they both fall to the ground. At that moment, Doji sends a message to Seon confirming that his recording and the kidnappers match, but he doesn't see it. Hyeju accidentally kisses him as she falls, but she doesn't pull away. She simply watches him while he sleeps. Seon wakes up from a nightmare about his childhood and is surprised to see Hyeju sleeping next to him. They both quickly pull away, feeling awkward. While getting ready, Seon tries to remember the night before but has no luck. Noticing that his phone is off, he puts it on charge. During breakfast, he asks Hyeju what happened, but she just asks him if he wants an honest answer. Before he can respond, he receives a call from Do-jae. While checking his messages, he discovers that Hyo is 406. Shocked, he decides not to tell Do-jae or confront her. Throughout the day, he tries to act normally, but the revelation leaves him unsure of how to proceed. Later, he concludes that there are two kidnappers and that 406 is not related to the bomb or the break-in. During his sign language classes with Hyo, he asks her to teach him how to say, "I forgive your mistakes." Realizing how difficult it is, he abruptly abandons the lesson. Abruptly. While picking up some papers, he discovers that Hyeju was planning to teach him another phrase. Hyeju receives a message from Inha, asking to meet up. Meanwhile, Woo-jung investigates Inha and feels relieved to confirm her return. Kyung-jin, on the other hand, gets lost in memories from 20 years ago. A flashback reveals that they were the parents of the boy Sang-woo met in the abandoned mansion, a boy with violent tendencies. When the families meet days later, Hui-jung surprises Il-kyung by asking about Ina. Hyeju meets Aina at an aquarium. Ina, now able to hear after surgery, tells her to stop pretending to be mute. Hyeju is upset. She responds in sign language that the decision is solely hers. Frustrated by her sister's constant interference, she leaves before the Little Mermaid show. Aina sends a message revealing that Seon asked her to marry him and made her his hostage. At home, Seon searches through Hyeju's things looking for the black phone. He realizes that there were many signs that she is 406, but he ignored them. When Hyeju finds him going through her drawer, he pretends to be looking for his own phone. To test it, he calls him and his cell phone rings in another room. Before leaving, he keeps rummaging and finds some lingerie. He starts teasing Hyeju, who tries to take the garment from him. In the midst of the struggle, they fall onto the bed. At that moment, Seon remembers a moment from the night before when their lips brushed against each other. He tries to ask her if they kissed, but he gets nervous and runs away. Later, he goes for a run, and at 10 p.m., he receives a call from 406. This time, they agree to answer each other one question at a time, honestly. Hyeju asks him about his deal with Inha, and Seon admits that the only person who brought him peace was Hyeju. He wanted to marry her to give her freedom, but it ended up becoming her second prison. Then, he offers her the possibility of a real marriage. When he asks her if she wants a divorce, Hyeju replies that she has waited long enough and that for 3 years, he has only kept her at a distance. As they talk, they start to understand each other better. Seon asks her if she is being threatened. She admits that in part yes, but she doesn't explain further. Seon ends the call by asking her if she will allow him to give her the attention she needs. Overwhelmed by the conversation, Hyeju hangs up, saying that it will depend on their actions. The next day, the SA team, Eon goes on retreat. SA. Eon gets upset when a recruit shows too much interest in Hyeju and tries to monopolize her time. During the games, he makes sure to be her partner, and after winning, he asks Jungwoo to take a picture of them. Elsewhere, Sangwoo and Yuri visit the orphanage. The kids mistake her for his girlfriend and show her embarrassing photos of him. Meanwhile, they look through an album and an old photo of Sangwoo from his childhood falls out. They talk to a nun who reveals that in the disappearance from years ago, it wasn't 3 children, but 4. One of the twins in the photo disappeared. Back at the retreat, the group goes hiking and Seon walks ahead with Hyeju. The others slowly go up. During the ride, he gives her his jacket in case she feels cold. The teammates notice their closeness and start to suspect Jangwoo defends his boss. When they reach the top, they try to take a group photo, but other hikers recognize Seon and come over to ask for photos. In the confusion, Hyeju falls from the lookout. Seon panics and goes down before the rescuers arrive. He finds a broken tree, but no signs of Hyeju. He gives his jacket so the dogs can track her scent. As night falls, anxiety grows. The news of the incident reaches the media, but Sayun ignores the reporters' calls. Do-jae is in charge of the press. Hyeju wakes up injured and with a damaged phone. She tries to call with the black phone but can only reach Seon. She hesitates to do it but finally makes the call. Seon, hiding that he knows who she is, pretends to believe that she's with the kidnapper. He tells her to use the first aid kit and a flare he left in her backpack. Hyaju lights it up, and upon seeing it, Seon thanks 406 and promises to arrive soon. She, exhausted and scared, begs him to hurry. In the epilogue, it is revealed that the night Seon got drunk, Hyaju asked him about his true feelings. He confessed that he liked her. Seon carries Hyaju in his arms while his voice keeps her conscious. In her mind, she relives the accident she had with Inha and her younger brother, remembering how they left her behind and her mother ordered her never to speak again. As she is being taken to the hospital, she admits to herself that she also feels something for Seon. When she wakes up, she finds him by her side. Before he can go look for the doctor, she stops him, and for the first time, she speaks to him directly, asking him not to leave her alone. Meanwhile, Huijong and his team are looking to take advantage of the incident to gain public sympathy. Hee-yu fears what Seon will do now that he knows she is 406. Imagine scenarios where he exposes her and demands payment for the contract penalty. During her medical checkup, she can barely concentrate. Do-jae informs Seon that there are no cameras in the area where she fell. So it's hard to tell if someone pushed her. Se-eon suspects that the attack was aimed at him and that she was just a collateral victim. They also discovered that the phone she used to call him had malware that allowed them to track her. Se-eon confronts Hee-ju and confesses that he knows everything. However, he doesn't pressure her to answer his questions and tells her to rest. Before leaving, he promises to talk when she recovers. Upon arriving at the office, he learns that Woo-jung has given a press conference without knowing that the victim was Hee-ju. The media is hounding their team, so Seon orders to block calls and issue a statement the next day. He also demands that Hee-ju's identity be kept a secret. Jang-woo suspects that Seon is hiding something, but he assures him that Hee-ju is safe. Jeon-hui discovers that In-ha has returned to the country and meets her at a spa. In-ha reveals that she came back to help Hee-ju and mentions some information she received before the wedding. At first, she thought her mother sent her, but now she doubts it. Young believes that Hee-ju has managed to manipulate Seon and hints that he knows a secret about him. Huijong feels confident that his political strategy is working, but he gets anxious when he doesn't hear from Seon. When he finally shows up at the office, Huijong tries to get him to stick to the speech they prepared. Seon confronts him, warning him to stop manipulating the incident or he will be forced to respond in another way. When Jong reminds him that he gave him the name Paik Sai-on, Seon recalls his childhood when he was forced to become the image of his deceased son, imitating him in every way. Angry, he makes it clear that he's on the verge of leaving everything behind. He also informs him that the person who fell off the cliff is his family, further surprising Wee-jung by revealing that he hired Hee-ju at the presidential office. Later, he returns to the hospital to take care of Hee-ju. Even though they both seem closer, at 10 p.m. he leaves. When Hee-ju calls him to ask where he is, he replies that he's waiting for a call. She understands that she's waiting for communication from 406, so she calls him from the black phone. Se-eon is playing with her, flirting and provoking her anger. He asks her to help him catch the real kidnapper by giving him all the information she has. Meanwhile, his office issues the official statement about the accident, using the data provided by 406 to the police. A composite sketch of the kidnapper is released, featuring a peculiar detail, eyes of different colors and a smell of fish. Sang-woo, at the read. The news shows him looking uneasy. At the same time, a man in a fishing supply store seems to recognize the description. The kidnapper, upon seeing his face on television, contacts his accomplice. The person who pushed Hee-ju tells him that they wanted Seon to feel the pain of losing someone important. Since Hee-ju survived, they now need to focus on recovering the black phone. In the office, Il-kyung questions Saeon about his sudden public exposure. Knowing him, she knows he wouldn't do something so risky, unless he was protecting someone. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Hae-ju receives a message from the kidnapper. He assures her that he didn't push her and that since he decided to abandon the plan, he needs to return the phone. Seeing that he ignores her order, she threatens him that she is on her way. Just as the door starts to open, Seon walks in and Hye-ju, relieved, clings to him. That night, Hye-ju decides to confess everything. At 10, she calls Seon from the black phone and they agree to meet. However, when he returns to the room, she is no longer there. Seon meets her in the park where her family suffered the accident that changed their lives. Before the meeting, he tries to calm her down. She gets distracted riding the carousel and eating ice cream. At the lookout, she expresses her fear that Seon will be disappointed and feel alone when he sees her. When they finally meet, Seon stares at her and assures her that he could never hate her. He approaches her and confesses that he doesn't know how to not love her. Then, he kisses her deeply. Seon finds an old childhood photo of himself with Hee-ju and remembers how much she has always meant to him. The scene returns to their confession of love and the kiss they shared. The next morning, Seon makes breakfast for Hee-ju. They talk more openly and realize how long they had hidden their feelings. Seon admits that he enjoyed coming home to her, but the fear of opening his heart made him act coldly. Hee-ju, for her part, confesses that she felt trapped in her role as a voiceless wife and just wanted to live a normal relationship. Then, he shows her the last message he received from the kidnapper. After breakfast, Hee-ju hands him the black phone and is surprised when Seon refuses to turn it over to the police. For him, the phone brought them closer. He jokes about his alter ego, Audaz, and mentions the photo in lingerie that she sent him. Ending in an embrace, Hye-ju wonders if it's all a dream. Meanwhile, the kidnapper receives a message from his accomplice asking if he got the phone back. He explains that he tried to infiltrate the hospital, but security stopped him. She gets upset remembering that Seon smelled good, as if that were a personal affront, and vows to take everything away from him the next day. Hye-ju has a nightmare where Seon leaves her, and she wakes up distressed, searching for him in her room. Upon finding him asleep, she gently strokes his face, which wakes him up. Seon pulls her into his bed and tells her that he took the day off. Hee-ju Nana suggests that they do something together as a couple, but he confesses to her that he has loved her for much longer than she imagines. Before they can make any plans, Jung-woo calls him, asking him to come to the office. There, he discovers that Jung-woo organized an intervention to cheer him up. Soon after, Do-jae arrives with news. They manage to track the kidnapper down to Ha-jong-jong-gi-do. Se-eon orders them not to involve the police and leaves immediately. Hyuk-jin, the reporter, calls worried when Seon mentions that he is going to confront the kidnapper alone. Meanwhile, Jung-hoi visits Hee-ju to warn her about Ina. But Hee-ju receives a message from the kidnapper asking if she really knows Seon. He sends her a clip from a variety show that seems to have hidden clues. Sang-woo visits the orphanage and the sister mentions Hee-ju as her first love. This makes him reflect and he decides to write to her. When Hee-ju visits him to ask her about the missing children from the orphanage, Sang-woo shows her the location of the mansion where the events took place. On the other hand, Hui-young and Kyung-jin move forward with their TV interview, although Hui-young seems worried and is secretly giving orders to his assistant. At an event, the press confronts him about his contradictory statements with those of S.A. Eon. He tries to justify himself by saying that Se-on was just trying to protect him, but a flower arrangement arrives with an enigmatic message. "We know what you did." In Ha-jong-esa, Eon finds a video accusing him of murder and vows to make him pay. Meanwhile, Sang-woo takes Hee-ju to the same house. Since it's late, they promise to come back another day, but Se-eon sees them and, blinded by jealousy, follows them. When Sang-woo mentions that he knows Hye-ju can talk, Se-eon intercepts them and demands that she come with him. Sang-woo tries to stop her, but she willingly gets into Se-eon's car. Before leaving, Se-eon warns Sang-woo that he knows he is involved, or at least knows the culprit. On the way, Se-eon stops and asks Hee-ju why she was there. She shows him the video she received from the kidnapper. Se-eon misinterprets the situation, thinking that she is investigating his past because she fears what she will uncover. Hee-ju explains that she knows what it's like to live with a secret and to be afraid of losing everything. She admits that she's scared, but not because she doubts him, rather because she's never been this happy and feels like she doesn't deserve it. Se-eon hugs her and asks, "How can I prove to you that I will always be with you?" She asks him to reveal his name, her secret. Se-eon fears that she will leave him, but he assures her that even if he renounced his name and his position, he would never let go of the part of himself that belongs to her. At Il-hyun's house, Jeon-hui listens in secretly while In-ha talks to her father. It is revealed that Il-hyun knew the truth about Se-eon and sent In-ha a DNA test days before the wedding. In-ha now wants to know what deal her father made with the Pike family. In a flashback, it shows that Paik-hyung made a deal with Il-hyung so that his family would obey his orders. The accident that killed Il-hyung's son and left In-ha deaf involved the real Paik Sa-yeon. Now, Il-hyung tells In-ha to leave the past behind and focus on the fact that the kidnapper knows the truth about the wedding and Hee-ju's marriage. Meanwhile, Woo-hyung and Kyung-jin are giving their interview with Yuri, trying to appear as the perfect couple. Kyung-jin addresses his son in an emotional message, promising him that he will always protect him. In a flashback, it shows that he said those same words to the real child, before locking him in the basement, assuring him that it was for his own good. After recovering, Hye-ju returns to work and is greeted with enthusiasm. In the elevator, she subtly flirts with Se-eon, moved by how quickly he has learned sign language. Then, she has lunch with her former colleagues, who notice that she is glowing. Meanwhile, the press continues to focus on Se-eon's private life. In response, he shows the video that the kidnapper sent him and promises an exclusive to the journalist who uncovers its true meaning. Jang Woo is frustrated by his impulsiveness. The office receives a call from an elderly man who identified the kidnapper in the previous episode. Leave a message warning Seon that someone is still alive. At the same time, Sang-woo is following a suspicious car. When Seon returns to the office, Young-woo hands him the message from the elderly man and mentions that the call came from a fishing store. Hearing the name of the business, Seon remembers meeting the owner when he was a child. Through a flashback, it shows that he witnessed Paik Hyung trying to drown the real Paik Seon. After that incident, the Paik family adopted him. Meanwhile, the kidnapper attacks the elder in the fishing store. Seon rushes to the scene, but when he arrives, he finds it in flames. He tries to rescue the elderly man, but the fire intensifies, and before he can get him out, he loses consciousness. Hyeju surprises In-ha by speaking in her own voice and confessing that she always knew Saeon's secret. Despite their differences, they both agree to find out who is behind the threats. Meanwhile, Seon tries to rescue Sang-hun, but they both lose consciousness. Worried about Saeon's disappearance, Hyeju is torn between contacts: involve the police or avoid a media scandal. She decides to ask her in-laws for help and as a sign of trust reveals that she knows Saeon is not their biological son. Kyungjin agrees to help, but with the intention of protecting his own reputation. In the conversation, Butler Min mentions that S.A. Aeon had heterochromia as a child and underwent surgery to correct it. Hyeju puts the pieces together and understands the truth behind his identity. Sang-woo calls her to inform her that Saeon is in the hospital. Upon arrival, he discovers that he was operated on. While waiting for his recovery, he apologizes to Sang-woo for hiding the truth from him. Sang-woo reveals that he followed Saeon to Sang-hun's house and arrived just in time to save them. When Saeon wakes up, Hyeju reassures him, telling him that everything will be okay. Sang-woo visits them and warns Saeon that he needs to be fair to Hyeju. Even though jealousy is still there, Saeon thanks Sang-woo for saving him. While checking his phone, he sees the multiple messages from Hyeju desperately looking for him. Yuri, upset with Sang-woo for ignoring her, meets with Hyuk-jin and gives him information about the case. The reporter starts to dig deeper into the case of the missing twins. Meanwhile, the kidnapper receives a message from his accomplice warning him not to act without permission. Hui-hyung continues his TV interview planning to use In-ha as Se-eon's wife. However, In-ha, instead of following the script, throws out questions about Se-eon's childhood, putting Hui-hyung in a bind. The situation worsens when Hui-hyung receives a package, believing it to be an order of seafood, but it turns out to be another threat from the kidnapper. Kyungjin runs after the man who delivered it and follows him to an old family house. Seon gets upset when she returns from talking to Sang-woo and finds out that Hyeju has disappeared. She is at home looking for the black phone to hand it over to the police and protect Sae-on. She suspects that the real Seon is trying to take revenge. Before he makes a mistake, Seon arrives and stops him. He confesses to her that he was able to overcome his suffering thanks to her. They return to the hospital together, where he admits to her that he tracks her location, but asks her never to look for him if he disappears. Instead, he promises her that he will always come back to her. Sang-woo calls Seon to inform her that Sang-hun has woken up. Sang-hun explains to her that he changed his name to protect himself and that for years he hid the bodies of the victims of the real Se-eon. Seon realizes that she had always been searching for Sang-hun without knowing that he had changed his identity. The next day, Jung-woo, unaware of the situation, decides to surprise Seon with a visit from the office staff. Seon panics when she sees them arriving, fearing they will discover Hyeju, and only agrees to speak with Dojae in private. Jung-woo, offended, walks away. For her part, Hyeju meets with Sang-woo to thank him and apologize. Sang-woo reveals to her that he always knew she could talk because a nun at the orphanage heard her singing a lullaby. He also assures her that Seon is protecting her. This leads Hyeju to remember the dinner with the ambassador, where Seon said that his wife was his weakness. Finally, she realizes that he has been protecting her from the very beginning. After recovering, Hyeju attends a national event as an interpreter alongside Seon. Her father and her former colleagues look at her with pride. After the event, Dojae takes her home, while Saeon visits the place where Sang-hun buried the victims. Saeon plans to gather evidence to reveal the truth when the time is right. Seeing the graves, she remembers having seen Sang-hun carrying black bags in her childhood. Hyuk-jin calls Seon with new information about the missing twins. He has gained access to the DNA database of missing persons, and she discovers that Doji is the lost twin. Seon tries to call him, but Dojae doesn't answer. In the back of Dojae's car, Hyejo is already unconscious after drinking tainted water. Seyeon calls him in vain and feels like her world is falling apart. Heeju's body is already unconscious in the back seat of Do-jae's car. In her mind, she imagines a life where she and Seyeon are a normal, happy couple, but the reality around them is much more complex. Elsewhere, the kidnapper arrives at the fishing store where Do-jae had arranged to meet him. However, instead of discussing the next phase of their plan, Do-jae attacks him with a bat. In a flashback, it shows that Do-jae discovered that the kidnapper is the real Pike Se-on and that his constant insubordination had frustrated him. Despite the ambush, the kidnapper manages to subdue Do-jae and beats him unconscious, stuffing him into a black bag aboard a boat. Seyeon arrives shortly after, believing that the bag contains Heeju. Desperate, he runs to save her while the kidnapper tries to escape with Heeju still in the car. However, she regains consciousness and struggles with him, causing the vehicle to veer off the road and crash into a rock. Dazed, she manages to get out and run into Seyeon's arms. The kidnapper backs up intending to run them over, but Seyeon pushes them out of the way just in time. Furious, he tells the kidnapper that he can keep his name and everything that comes with it because he never wanted it. However, the kidnapper asks him if he will also hand over Heeju, implying that he wants to make her his wife. This comment brings out the worst in Seyeon, who attacks him mercilessly. During the fight, the kidnapper pulls out a knife, but Do-jae suddenly appears and takes the stab in the stomach. While bleeding, Do-jae confesses that he was the one who sent the kidnapper after Heeju and pushed her off the cliff. He wanted Seyeon to feel the same despair he experienced after the death of his twin brother. Now, filled with regret, he acknowledges that he had been chasing the wrong man all this time. Before losing consciousness, he is taken to the hospital where an investigation begins. At the presidential headquarters, Seyeon confronts his past while Heeju tries to comfort him. He tells her that he lived in the fishing store during his childhood, catching fish with his hands just like the kidnapper had hinted. Meanwhile, it is revealed that Kyujin always knew that the kidnapper was his son Sang-ho, who deceived him into believing he was dead. Now, Hui Young refuses to call his son, helping her find him, seeing it only as a problem that threatens his political future. While they argue, the kidnapper plans his next move. At the hospital, the police interrogate Do-jae, but he refuses to cooperate. Seyeon asks him to help catch the kidnapper, but Do-jae believes he would never dare to expose the family's secrets. Pike. Seyeon assures him that he trusted him completely and begs him to do the same to put an end to everything. Meanwhile, Sang-woo identifies the belongings of the missing children at the police station, while Heeju discovers that her younger brother, Yoo-jin, may have seen the face of the real Se-on before he died. When her mother shows up to scold her for the trouble her relationship with Se-on has caused, Heeju finally stands up to her. She declares that she will never be the daughter-in-law of a president and makes it clear that she understands what love is, something her mother never gave her. Later, Se-on arrives home and finds lit candles. Heeju, dressed elegantly, hands him her marriage contract, revealing that she always knew it was him who sent the DNA test to In-ha. Seyeon confesses to him that she was never a replacement but the person he always wanted by his side. They hug and kiss, promising each other a true future together. The next day, Do-jae receives a report about the remains found at the site where Sang-hoon buried the victims. Among the items is a shoe belonging to his twin brother. Filled with pain, he finally agrees to help Seyeon capture the kidnapper. Fortunately, he had installed trackers in the items he gave to the kidnapper, allowing the police to track his location. Meanwhile, Hye is Jo-ae and In confront their father about Yoo-jin's death. Now that they know the real Se-eon is still alive, Lee Kyujin bursts in at Sang-ho's funeral, pointing a gun at Hui Young and demanding that he hand him over. Before he can do anything, an explosion shakes the place. Se-eon, who receives the kidnapper's location, rushes to the site only to discover that Haiju has disappeared. The kidnapper calls him, showing him that he has her in the car, threatening her with a knife. He tells him that he will make him pay for not saving him when Sang-ho tried to drown him. Se-eon arrives at the scene and tells Heeju to hold on, promising that he will save her, but she stops him. She reminds him that she swore to protect him with tears in her eyes. She tells him that she loves him and that he will make sure the kidnapper never hurts him again. In a desperate act, he floors the accelerator and drives the car toward a cliff. Se-eon only hears the impact before everything goes silent. The rescuers find the car, but neither Heeju nor the kidnapper is inside. 2 days later, Se-eon calls a press conference. In front of the whole country, he confesses that he is not the real son of Woo-jung and Kyujin and that Hyeju is his wife. In a firm voice, he pleads for help to bring her back home. The last images take us back to the night when Heeju confessed to Se-eon that she loved him. He told her that his only purpose in life as Pike Saeon had been to find her. With one last hopeful glance, Heeju hugged him tightly. The past lingers in Seon's mind as he imagines a reality where he confessed his love to Heeju from the very beginning. She wonders what would have happened if they had decided to try it as a real couple, but it's too late for the what-ifs. After Heeju told him not to try to save her, Seon set out to find her. Meanwhile, she crashed her car into the guardrail in a desperate attempt to end it all. When the police find traces of the accident, everything suggests that the car fell into the water after smashing through the barrier. They immediately start a search, but the chances of finding her alive are slim. Heeju's family arrives at the scene panicked. Meanwhile, Ui-hyung and Lee-kyung are having a confrontation amid the chaos. Amidst everything, Seon realizes that his mother hasn't shown up and orders the detectives to find out where she is. That night, Seon checks Kyujin's car for clues. He notices that someone deleted the dashcam recording, and when he confronts his mother, she admits that she went through the same thing years ago. He desperately searched for his son, and now Seon deserves to suffer in the same way. The next morning, Yuri interrupts the regular news programming to ask for help in the search for Heeju. Along with Sang-woo, they travel to the accident site, where they find Seon's colleagues but not him. Seon has followed a lead and meets with the detectives, who confirm that they did not get a warrant to search Kyujin's car. Seon responds with a plan to expose the Pike family. On television, Woo Young is holding a press conference recounting how his son supposedly drowned and how they adopted Seon by fate. However, Hyuk Jin interrupts with a recording from Dojae, revealing the truth about the missing children from the orphanage and the cover-up by Pike Jang-ho. As the scandal grows, the police burst into the conference to arrest Kyujin, accusing her of murder. The woman assumes they are referring to Heeju, but in reality, they are accusing her of having killed Jang-ho. It turns out that the old man was wearing a ring with a camera that recorded his last conversation with Kyujin before he died. In the recording, Jang-ho confessed that Saeon was his biological son and refused to apologize for what he did to his real son. Furious, Kyujin suffocated him with a pillow. Meanwhile, the truth about Heeju comes to light. After the crash, his car never fell into the water. It was Mr. Mina. Whoever found her with the kidnapper and following Kyujin's orders took them to the old mansion near the orphanage, where they locked them in separate basements. Ju, upon regaining consciousness, refused to eat, knowing that Kyujin was only keeping her alive to torment Saeon. Thanks to the restoration of the dashcam, the police find Hyeju's location and head to the site with Saeon in the lead. At the same time, Mr. Min, disobeying Kyujin, frees Heeju and tries to lock the kidnapper in the basement. However, Huijong appears with a gun and orders him to open the door. In her escape, Heeju hears a gunshot and falls unconscious. In the basement, the kidnapper and Huijong struggle for the gun until Huijong gives in, seeing a reflection of himself in the kidnapper. A second shot rings out and Heeju wakes up scared. The kidnapper chases her through the woods. Heeju, who once wished to die, is now fighting to survive. She hides, running towards the road just as Seon arrives. Seeing her, he runs to her and hugs her, relieved. The police are searching for the kidnapper. Meanwhile, Seon takes Hyeju to the car. She warns him that the man is still armed. On the way to the hospital, the kidnapper appears and points a gun at Seon. He orders him to get out of the car. Even though Heeju begs him not to, Seon obeys. The kidnapper whispers something in Seon's ear, completely changing his expression. With a face full of sadness, he looks at Hyeju one last time before the police intervene and surround the kidnapper. The kidnapper, with a strange satisfaction, aims at Seon. A gunshot is heard and the screen fades to black. In the final scene, Heeju imagines a normal life with Seon, regretting that she never confessed her feelings to him before. She tries to call him, but there's no answer. Then he receives an international call. She responds eagerly, hoping to hear his voice. But on the other end of the line, there's only silence. It's been 6 months since Seon's disappearance, and Heeju is still living in a limbo of uncertainty. Every night, the same nightmare haunts her. She sees Seon in front of the kidnapper, hears the gunshot, and before she can do anything, she wakes up in the cold reality of her empty room. Despite everything, she does not lose hope of seeing him again, although his absence becomes more unbearable with each passing day. 6 months ago, Hyukjin called her with devastating news. Eon has donated all his fortune to charity and has stepped down from his position as spokesperson. Since then, he has disappeared without a trace. Hyeju clings to any clue, visiting Dojae in prison in search of answers, but he refuses to talk. Even Inha, who seems to know more than she admits, stays silent. The truth about the Pike family has come to light and the impact has been irreversible. The real Pike Sayon dies that night in the confrontation with the police. Hyojin receives a life sentence, but he appeals for the death penalty. In his last words to his son, he expresses his regret for not having protected him from Pike Jang-ho. However, he never acknowledges the monstrosity of his actions. Hui Hyung, for his part, resigns from politics, and he decides to live a life away from the spotlight. His public statement surprises many, as it makes it clear that he doesn't want to bear the burden of his family's crimes. Mr. Min, loyal until the end, is sentenced to 5 years in prison for his complicity in the Pike family's atrocities. In the midst of chaos, Sang-woo and Yuri find stability in each other. After months of being together, they announce their engagement. What started as a friendship filled with constant arguments has evolved into a strong relationship. Although Sang-woo seemed like a hard man to read, he has proven to be a trustworthy person and above all, someone who can make Juri happy. One day, Hyeju-bi receives an unexpected letter, a thank you from a sign language school in Argon for a donation of 2 billion won. His intuition tells him that Seyeon is the benefactor, so he clings to this lead as his last chance to find him. To get more information, he meets with Hyukjin and asks him about the time he spent with Seyeon in Argon. Hyukjin tells him about a special place where his friend used to watch the sunset. Against all warnings, Hyeju decides to travel to the war zone, hoping that he is still there. Her arrival in Argon is not easy. She persists in her search and heads to the place where Seyeon used to sit and watch the horizon. However, her determination puts her in danger when a group of rebels kidnaps her. The situation seems desperate, but then Seon appears to save her. When they finally reunite, Seon confesses his guilt. Discovering that Pike Jang-ho was responsible for her brother's death led her to believe that she had pretended to ignore it to protect him. And Na told him that Hyeju always knew the truth, which led him to punish himself by distancing from her, but Hyeju assures him that they've been caught in a misunderstanding. He reminds her how much time they've lost by not speaking honestly and tells her that he doesn't want to wait any longer. In that moment, she hugs him desperately and Seeon, unable to resist, returns the gesture. Seeon makes a definitive decision to leave behind his past as Pike Seeon and be reborn under a new name, Pike Yu-yeon. He is no longer interested in power or the family that adopted him. He just wants to start over with the woman he loves. Together, Yu-yeon and Heeju plan a new wedding, this time without contracts or family pressures. The ceremony is intimate, with only their closest friends present. During the celebration, Yuri and Sang-woo announce their engagement, adding a note of joy to the occasion. Little by little, Hyeju rebuilds her relationship with her family. Although the process is slow, her parents finally give their blessing. She also reconciles with In-ah, encouraging her to let go of the past and find her own happiness. Meanwhile, Yoo Jae-hon reunites with Sang-hoon, the man who protected him during his childhood. Hyeju finds her purpose as a sign language interpreter at a news station. Yoo Jae-hon, for his part, becomes a state negotiator. His first case takes him on an emergency mission, which fills Hyeju with worry. One night, she receives an unexpected call. When she answers, she hears Yoo Jae-hon's voice on the other end of the line. With a smile, he asks her to keep calling him 406 whenever she's upset with him, so he'll always know when he's done something wrong. I will always be honest with you, Heeju replies. So, wait for me, I'll be back home. As Yoo Jae-hon utters these words, a familiar figure appears by his side. Do, Jae, now turned into her assistant. It seems that Destiny still has more stories to tell. And that's how it ends. When the phone rings, a story of secrets, redemption, and a new beginning for Hee, Ju, and Se-eon. What started with a call turned into a journey of discovery and transformation for each character. If you like this summary, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and turn on the notification bell for more content. See you in the next video.